Okay, let's begin. My name is Raleigh Green. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Welcome to tonight's lecture hosted by the Hurley Heritage Society. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. I'm a board member of the Hurley Heritage Society and organizer of our lecture series, and I'm very pleased to host tonight's presentation. Before we get started, a few quick notes. Please be sure you are on mute so that everyone can hear the guest speaker and that there are no interruptions. During the presentation, if you have a question, you can use the chat feature to send your questions and they will be answered during the presentation or at the end. There'll be a Q&A period at the end. At the conclusion, we'll do those questions and then everyone can unmute themselves. This presentation is being recorded and it will be posted on the Hurley Heritage Society Facebook and website in the coming days. Tonight's presentation shines a light on one of Hurley's most iconic buildings and within a historic street filled with old stone houses. Tonight's presentation reminds me of my personal experience with my grandparents who had an old stone house in Pennsylvania along the Susquehanna River, and how I loved as a child visiting their historic house that was built in 1740. What I remember as a child was that it was always dark and it was very cool in the summer and temperate in the winter. And I loved the big roaring fires and the huge stone fireplaces and running up and down the narrow staircases and exploring secret spaces and rooms. For many of us, these old stone houses capture our imagination about life in the past and provide us with a direct connection to those who lived so long ago. Without further delay, let me introduce you to our guest speaker, Jim Decker. He's a Hurley resident and owner and steward of the historic Ostrander Elmendorf house. He's also the Hurley Town Historian and a restorer of homes. So without further ado, let me turn this over to you, Jim.
Okay.
And thank you. Thank you for your time and interest in the Hurley Heritage Society.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's my screen. Did I lose you all?
No, we can see you. We see the screen.
Oh, can everybody hear me?
You're on screen sharing.
Okay. Tonight I'd like to share with you a little bit about my home and my experience here at the Elmendorf house. It's actually the Elmendorf homestead. It's been in the same family here since 1804. Though the building develops much earlier. I want to start by showing you the building and giving you a little bit of understanding of the building and how I've learned through documentation what the building actually was. So I'd like to just start by showing you in 2008, I purchased the Elmendorf home from Ruth Lord. Her mother was the last Elmendorf to live here in the house. It took me around 5 years for her to learn who I was and to relinquish the care of this building to me. And her have become my family as well. So with a start, I just want to share a couple old photos with you, and then throughout the presentation, I will show some old photos. So our first image is the oldest image that I have of the building. The people in the front are John L. Elmendorf and his wife Eliza, their son Peter. Peter was the person that ended up being the postmaster here in the house, but he's standing along the front and he looks to be about 10 years old. The little girl on the corner of the building was just town member. And it's all listed on the back of the image. If you go up the left-hand corner of this image, you see a little a fragment of a chimney in the back, and it's hard to see, but on that left edge of that image, it does show the roof line extends beyond the main block of the building, and I'll get to that afterwards. So this is the next image that I have of the building. It shows a change in the building, in that the wing in the back was done, and I only learned this year, in 1894. And that gentleman that was out front, John L. Elmendorf, did the change there in the back of the house. So as I purchased the house, I was taking images because I needed to learn what the building was. These are reference images now. Things have changed since then. You notice there's a strip floor in the main hall when you first walk into the house. The walls are furred out. You can see that along the door jamb. Right in here, you can see that crack where they've added a section of wall to hide the old plaster, the failing plaster. On the left side of this hall, there's a board wall made out of boards and nailed to a batten on the bottom and the top to create a hall space. Originally, the house was a one-room cell. This is in the adjoining room, the middle section of the house, and I'm just going to briefly go through these a little bit. This is as purchased. This was the same day that I took ownership. I was taking some photos, so they are part of its history. We want to keep that as history. But what brought me to this building was there's a lot of original here of an early 18th century building. I've been working in restoration for 45 years and studying the early stone houses of our area, and actually along the Hudson Valley. And by doing so, I learned different eras of fabric, and I did recognize that this building had a lot of original features, and it will tell me a little bit more about it once I get into it. So this is in the middle room, the fire breast and cupboards on either side. The corner cupboard that was kind of iconic in some of the old histories. It does show English influence as well as a Dutch influence. The little carved head over the top of the doorway is of a Dutch influence, and the English egg and dart treatment is apparent in this cupboard. The cupboard's probably around 1750. Another view, the blurry view of this that room. The front hall, the front door, back front door. It shows where there's been a treatment added to the walls, as in the front room. So back of the hall, this is along the addition in the back. What Ruth told me was their summer kitchen, but now it's getting ready to getting all the debris out of the house. So that's what that picture is. So upstairs above this, there was a room that had beaded board walls and ceiling. This was all removed for more modern insulation. So restoration started with documentation. This is John Stevens and myself. He's an architectural historian and my mentor. we were documenting the Cool House here in town, and Cool is spelled both ways, K and C. Oh, well, that being the stone house bed and breakfast some time ago. Uh, so document John and I, we measured the house, and this is as you see it today. Um, this was we measured the house up, and this is starting our documenting process for learning about the changes here in the building. There's another image, early image, second earliest image I have. That is Catherine Elmendorf. She married Peter, and that is their daughter Ethel. So, and with this image, we learned actually how the front wall was on what I call the store section of the house. It has a Dutch door here and a window. And you can note in this image, you can see where the blend of the wall was for the second edition. So with that image, we learned a Dutch door in the east section of the house. So John drew up the east section of the house as it was. So I'm going to give you a series of drawings that help explain the building, hopefully. And so looking at the front of the house, the facade, this is the original portion of the house. You can see to the door a vertical joint. That vertical joint is the east end of the house, the original portion of the house. What you're seeing here is I had stripped back the window frames. They were multi-layered of paint, and that just is primer. The sash were replaced by me. I had a good friend of mine make the sash for me as I was working on other portions of the building. Excuse me. So this is the original portion of the house, and what we learned from this, and the bottom of this image would be the street side of this, basically the first floor plan. And this shows the timbers running from east to west. And in normal construction, and back then as well, construction, your timbers constitute where your rafters are going to be, because those timbers act also as part of a truss type system to hold your walls together. On the upper portion of this drawing, you'll see these little squares. That is the hearth of a jambless fireplace. I have fragments of the hearth tiles that were there. The little box in the front corner was a hatch to the basement. Still existent. So we come up with a drawing of the front of the house. So you're looking toward the north from that section of the house. It shows what is known as a jambless fireplace, where you have a sofa over top of a hearth that's down here, to draw the smoke out of the building. We do know the roof structure, though as it's changed in the second edition of this house, the fragments of the rafters, the original rafters, were reused, and we know where the collar ties were. These are the collar ties up here. And this will be set at 7 feet from the floor of the second story, and then the upper collar tie being at 6 feet. And this is normal construction back then. This is a valance hood. The valance hood hung below the smoke hood. It actually is dropped down to help gather that smoke out of the room. And bear in mind that the whole family lived in this one room. The upper floor was just used for storage. This little square here is actually the hearth support. Still in existence is an original barred opening in the basement of this space. Okay, so John and I figured out in the early 18th century, it did have leaded windows, and most of your doors and windows had lead glazing in them. So we come up with this idea of what the building was. And from documentation or me finding fragments of glass, we do know underneath where these window spaces on the upper floor, I did have window glass along the front wall and back. So we know that there was windows on either side of the building. So our treatment of weatherboards on the upper section of this, we weren't certain of. We didn't know. Oh, I'm sorry. I go back. We didn't know exactly what they were. So, this window here is what's known as a Klosterkosen. It's a cross window. We call them cross windows. It would have been a window placed in the wall with shutters and no glazing in those lower openings, and just fixed lead glass on the top, as well as fixed leaded glass where the transom would be on the door. This is an image of the Abe Hasbrook house. I did some restoration down there about 4 years ago. These new windows, these Klosterkosen windows, and also restored the lead glass in the door there. So this gives you an idea what these windows were. So think of the Northeast having just a shutter as it opened out to the weather, and trying to keep that inside of that building quite warm was pretty difficult with the big flue of the jamless fireplace in the building. So back to that, we found new evidence, doing some cleaning in the building, getting rid of some of the furred out walls. The baseboard along this whole what is known as a mop board, we know them as baseboards today. It had a molded edge, and the molded edge ran around the building to where this section of the door was. And the reason we know that the door was changed from this location is because the molding returns to the floor at that location. In the early 18th century, we have these timber frame door frames dams were plastered up against the main room. So that's why you had a return on the baseboard. So we do know that the facade changed quite drastically. So, oops, let's go back. As I was mentioning to you, the siding or the weatherboards, we weren't certain if they were vertical siding or horizontal siding. So now we get to the next drawing that John did. So our hypothesis of the front of the house being with the steep pitch and the doorway being in that location. Upon being upstairs, there was 2 rooms installed upstairs in the house that I removed because they were 1920s. Upon along the front wall, right where my cursor's, I did find fragments of what is known as a pan tile. Now, a pan tile is a clay tile roof. We do know there was a gentleman by the name of Cornelius Hogeboom in the 18th century making roof tiles and brick. So this is probably where they came from. So I found these fragments and that gave us a new light on what the building looked like. So this is a pan tile, what the clay tiles would have been. This is the back of the tile laid sideways. On the back of the tile, you have what is known as a lug. This lug hung on uh, purlin lath that went across to the rafter, and these were hung and basically glued with cement. They sealed down these tiles on against one another. So they were just hung. There was no other attachment other than a little bit of mortar that they did use to seal this type of roof. It wasn't long after that I found some fragments of more pan tiles in the lane to the cemetery. So, which led me to some archaeological work. I did a 2 meter square unit right near the barn. That's where I located some of these fragments, and I wanted to know if there was more. So that would kind of tell me that the fragments are actually from the house, and that they reuse them to help create the roadbed to the cemetery. And there's the fragments of pan tiles that came out of that unit. So we weren't certain it had a wooden gable, but we do know with a pan tile roof that you had to have a parapet. Now a parapet is a way of the front wall and back wall extended beyond the roof surface, and that would help your pan tiles against the front and back wall of the building. This is the interior of the Cornelius Cool House. That's one's legs there. We were up in there measuring the building and found this is encapsulated in the roof. And we see brick tumbling. This is called brick tumbling or vlectigen. It's a way of sealing the edge of the roof or the edge of the wall, actually. So this is what we come up with for what the Elmendorf house had been like. Actually, it was probably built by Arndt Ostrander, and I'll get to that later. So this is an understanding of what the original building was. With a jambless fireplace. This shows you what a jambless fireplace was. There was a brick hood over top of on the second floor. So your brickwork, and then you would have a hearth down here. So you would be building your fire down on a hearth against this back wall, and hopefully the smoke would leave the building. Shows the rafter placement. The hearth support still exists in the basement, and there it is. This one is actually unique because it's an earlier form. We've documented these throughout the valley, and there's only two in existence that we found that the brickwork land within inside the stone wall, the back wall of the building. They usually rest on stonework right in this area. This particular image shows a pier that was put on underneath in the center of this brick arch. And the reason it's done is because there was an iron stove at one time placed above it up into the jamless, what was a smoky fireplace. They were starting to use iron stoves. I did actually find a fragment of the door to this stove in the basement. So that gives me a little credence that there was a stove to
Hi, Jim.
this
No, we
Thank
saw
you,
him
Jim.
briefly. Heard him briefly. I heard that. How long is it?
so now we have
Like I
an
know.
image.
All right.
Somebody's got to turn off their.
Hey, Louis, can you thank you. Can you mute yourself? Thank you.
Anyway, so here's the three things of what the original house was. Somebody's still on. Okay. This center image shows the hood, and
that's just one of our
fire
many
back
worlds.
was used
Want to explore undersea worlds
to keep.
Can people please mute themselves?
in history, or take a quick flight. You'll want to
Noreen, Russell, can you please mute yourself?
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So our next slide, just to reiterate what I said about the Vlectigan. Vlectigan is this brick tumbling up along the front and back parapeted wall. So this is what, if you can imagine, I do know there's another early building in the town that it may have had, might be as early as this house. And you all know it as the house by the bridge. And that section of one section of that house would be similar to this. So then we have our first addition to the house. We know the rafters are this tall because of existing reused rafters in the second edition. So we do have this for our first edition. So looking along the front, that would here's your first addition on this side of this line, and then the blend right in here would be your second addition, right between what is the general store and the middle room. Another image of an early image of the building showing the shutters shut. I believe this is just post 1900, because there's the sign for Mrs. Elmendorf's rag weaving production was still on the building. So there we got our second edition was placed on the building, showing that door. And you notice the rafter, and at that time, what they did is they removed all the rafters. They removed the rafters from the first edition and the first edition and the first section of the house, and then they lowered the pitch on the roof. They created the jamless fireplace hood. So that's give you an idea of what it was way back, roof line wise. So, this is the basement plan. On the section here, there's a pier that I showed you. There's a hall. The hallway is right in this location. now. To give you an idea. And then once the roof was rotated in the original portion of the house, the jambless fireplace hood was removed and a Rumsford style fireplace was installed in the room. Middle room shows the jambless hood. It would be right in this location. That still exists. What I call the store, which actually was built for a workroom. It's believed that it was built for two looms. There was two 18th century looms here in the house. One that still exists here in the house. When I cleaned out this room, I did find evidence of board roll through the center of this room and a wooden ceiling in the east end of this room. The addition to the north, what is presently my kitchen wing at the moment, it shows you the floor plan where the roofers are. And then there's a large hearth space in the back of this room. This basement plan shows what was, and I believe was the slave quarters. The indentured servants, the servants actually became basically members of the family, but they were still segregated from the family. So you would have gone out of the back hall onto an open porch and into this space. Originally, with the first two builds of the house, the basement plan shows that they may have been living in that location at that time. There's basement opening has roofing in it, and so they could have air, obviously. And there is another little window on this side. So it's not certain when this section of the building was added. And then it was added later in 1994. John L. Elmendorf removes that section, takes down the stone to a foundation level and extends the foundation and puts the wooden section on the building. This photo shows the gable end here, showing what is known as the window. It's a casement window, a double casement window. We believe that was moved from the wall of the house and reused in that location. I show a section of the building looking from the street into showing the basement, and we do not have a full basement under the store. This shows a 1923 door that was installed in the building that still exists. In this drawing shows the rafter placement for the kitchen wing. Kitchen wing down a jambless fireplace, as shown here. This is a image by Dr. Nash in 1908. Shows the corn stalks right up to the back of that. They used every space here on the farm that they had. This is a good image. This is a 1908 photo of the east gable. Shows that window. It does show vertical siding placed on the gable end. And what I have is fragments of this siding, and it was never painted. It was just weathered pine, hard pine. Peter Elmendorf in the 20s installs this the siding on the east gate. I found inscriptions and building paper on to the right of that window. This is me and a friend installing new siding to get the siding that was there in the 1908 photo. I installed windows of the 19th century in this gable because if I was to restore it, I don't know exactly what was in that location. There may be small ventilating windows in that wall. I don't know that. By the 1908 photograph is all I had to go with, so I restored it to that era. So that's the restoration of that. If you look at this casement, if this casement, when it was moved to this location, and I'm not sure the era when it was, we think around 1790 they moved some stuff. But they, at least in 1790, the sash were changed. The casement sash took on a wooden barred window as opposed to lead. The hinges in that window still exist. And this is what it most likely would have looked like. And this is a Balcazar window. This is a window that I made for historic Huguenot Street 4 years ago, and shutters. So getting back to this slave quarters, the slave quarters, I did find in the basement a large stone that would have probably had brick. So I'm not sure added to it. Whether there must have been some heat source there. There's evidence of chimneys in a couple images that I have in that location. So they did have heat in that space. I just wanted to point that out. So, this is a section in the house with encapsulated 18th century roof. These are white cedar. They are 24-inch long shingles. The first course was removed off of this wall when the addition was put on, and that shows how they attached the wooden shingles. They nailed the edge of the shingle, so you didn't have any curling. The little V's were to move the water from the. All right, this is looking east into the first edition of the house, showing the jambless smoke hood that still exists, and the valance hood and a little window that was placed along near the fireplace. Along the place, jambless fireplaces, we know that they had to have light in at their hearth. So this is logical. They had a window in this location. The doorway is probably been put in later when the next edition was put on. The original hearth still is in existence, as is the window frame down in the basement. It shows the current roof line and rafter color. In the front, you can see this basement window. That's where the first edition slaves, I believe, lived there. Those windows were movable. They were casement. It was a small casement window, which I replicated and put back in that wall. Getting back to the hall. Okay, the hall. So I started restoration in the hall. I removed the 2x4s and precursor to sheetrock was like his fiberboard nailed onto the 2x4s to fur out the walls to hide all the failing plaster. And the strip floors were removed. There was a strip floor in this room, next room over, and above here. So that all was removed. Some floor repairs to do. This is just documenting my floor repair. I did it for myself, so I added that to the. Fortunately, I have the material to match it. I have like material to match it from other buildings that were taken down. This shows the house, the hallway getting its original color back. It is a oil-based paint. I found a good company in England that makes the old way of making the paint, and they do that today. They use an iron oxide as a mold inhibitor. Years ago, they had white lead. They put lead in the paint, and as you see the paint, it's drying slowly, very slowly. The oils will eventually come out of this, and it'll be a muted flat finish. This is in the front room on the original section of the house, on behind the board wall. This is as the day I bought it. You notice there's paper the paper board with thousands of little tacks all on the board wall that were all removed. On taking that out, I found some graffiti on the wall. You can see some color coming through some of the chips. There's Petrus Elmendorf, Petrus von Elmendorf's inscription on there. Petrus was the one that purchased the house in 1804, and it wasn't till the next year that, or it may have been the same year that he was running a tavern in this location. And one could think, now here's a hangman. Were they talking about the spy that was apprehended in Hurley? I just wondered if that was the case in this location. Now, in front of this space, that board wall, right here, I found, and I didn't realize it until a few years ago, that the floor was very worn right in one location against the wall. And I realized that that's where the tavern keeper was stationed. So down in Huguenot Street, they have this, what I believe is partly a kind of a freestanding section of a tavern keeper's bar, and this may have been what was in that location. So there's the board wall, been repainted. The door was changed in the 1920s. That door was removed and put in the horse barn. This is a replica. The door itself was compromised by some rot, so I chose to put a new door instead of repairing the old one. It would have been difficult to add needed, so I chose to replicate the door. And right in here is where that paper was really worn on the floor. The wall has evidence of shelving right behind here, probably narrow shelving, and behind this wall too was shelving, probably for taverns or the like. On the opposite side of that room, in the original room, this is as I walked into the house, there was this oak mantle there that was placed over the fireplace there, which was removed. Probably done in the 20s when most of this renovation was done. This is what was behind there. This fireplace opened infilled with brick, and the original. This is an original fireback that was probably reused from the jamless fireplace in that room. So this board wall I moved, and I stripped it back. There was a shelf here at one time, but that was a later addition. So this is restored. The bricks are from the original jamless on the other side of the room. And it did get the first color paint. So that's how it is today. This shows the inside. The original insides still existed here in the garret. One thing that I was hoping that would never leave, and it reads PED Inn, Petrus Elmendorf Inn. And there's a moon in where the half moon comes from, I'm not certain. I have not found it in any documentation yet. So we still call it the Half Moon Tavern, but this is moon. So Petrus Elmendorf had his inn here, and he had his inn here until well, the last reconnaissance that I found was in 1824. Petrus Elmendorf had to pay $125 levy in here. And on the bottom of this document, it reads, he will not, while keeping in, have a disorderly inn or suffer or permit any cockfighting, gaming, playing cards or dice, or billiards, or game tables, or shuffleboard within the inn or on the premises. So he had to put his neck out, especially for an inn. But at $125 in 1824, that was a lot of money to put as tax on the place. There was numerous instances where the town fathers used the inn for meetings and such. So were they having a beverage with me? Not sure. So back to the front hall. This is in space. That's the restoration done. And you notice the front in the front, the original hatch is still existent in the floor. That's where you went down to the basement. As above there, there's a hatch above there to go to the garret. So back in the first edition, this is how I first purchased the house. Something's not right here. There's a late 18th century, 1790s, 1810 mantle in this location, and it wasn't sitting well with me. So I opened her up. The brickwork was really badly damaged behind this iron fireback, which was probably original. It's almost burnt out. So I removed this mantle and found that the brickwork was falling forward in the building. I removed the corner cupboard right in this location, as I knew it would be. And on the other side, the crown molding for the jamless smoke hood profile was still in the plaster there. So you can see that right in this location, this most likely was 18th century, but late 18th century. This brickwork was quite large. Along both of that, there are long uh, series of short bricks or small thin bricks to hold side jams. These jams were in the building. They were originally added to the jamless fireplace because this fireplace was smoked. So this is during restoration. Um, behind the stove, a lot of the stonework was crumbling from the heat. The early jams were getting restoration here. They were both falling sideways, so we had to re-erect them as a solid and attach them to the wall. This is the smoke hood above that location. Um, there's there's a fault in the front wall because the collar tie right here fractured and opened up, and the weight of the chimney and roof pushed on the front wall of a failing wall, which is still partly in need of restoration. These rafters, these collar ties are all restored this year. The fireplace, when I removed the cupboard from that, I noticed a vertical crack in the plaster and it was quite straight. I wondered why, and there was a small space between there, so I peered in there and saw wood. So I knew there was a frame of a window in that location. So I removed a brick out of this location, and it most likely was done brick from the original room when that section they removed that, so those bricks moved over here into some of those bricks were placed in this opening. So they closed this opening up, and you can see it's failing plaster, but that corner was really remarkably still intact. So I was really pleased. The lead, my friend Bill McMillan, the lead, I've since learned to do it. So that's why I was able to do it in Huguenot Street for Huguenot Street. That's the little window, one of the jamless hood restored. So that's that space. As restored. These hooks that are on the jamless are original to the house. They set on lug poles. A lug pole is someplace for these hooks to hang over top of your hearth for pots and the like. So the gun is a militia gun, 1805 militia gun. One of the family members had it and allowed me to purchase it from him to bring it back to the house. It's a gun that was used by two generations, Lucas Elmendorf Jr. and John L. Elmendorf. And the inscriptions are on the gun. And that's our drawing looking towards that east end, showing that jamless hood. And the cradle still exists. The original cradle exists under this space. And there's the image when I first bought the place. So there's the cradle. You notice the stonework that's still it protrudes from the wall to receive timber, and wood were laid up, and sand and brick were laid up for your earth. Few images of the house early. This is post 1900. Mrs. Elmendorf's sign still on the left side of the building. We see these early images that I have of the place. This is an image showing the first installation of the dormers. The dormers were placed here in 1917, if not a little bit earlier. This photograph is marked 1917 on it. I know that by actually I have the negative, and the negative is marked the 1917. So that was a good discovery for dating when the farmers started on the building. There's another image that I have early in that. And we notice there's no sign any longer here. So this is 1918. They installed 2 more dormers in the house. I'm not certain if that's when this little problem developed in the wall. So it's been there that long. So that helps me dating the dormer installation in the house. Another image of that. This is Peter Elmendorf. This would have been Ruth's great-grandfather. No, grandfather. And he became the postmaster here in Hurley. He took over for Charlie Dumond, and Charlie Dumond had a little general store and post office right across the street from my building, right sitting in the corner of the yard of the Heritage Society. So Peter went to school. This is his school picture to be a postmaster in Connecticut. So he comes back home because his father, John L., was getting on in years, and they need help on the farm. So he removes to here, takes over for Charlie, and then in 1923 does he open the wall up and moves the post office and general store into his own building. This is the family. Peter's over here on the left. He was the postmaster. It's his brother Edward, Anna. This is Elizabeth, Josephine. This is Mr. Rennis, her husband, John L. Elmendorf, Elmendorf, and Charlie Dumond, who was a family friend. So there's Peter and Catherine and his daughter. This would have been Ruth's mother. And so I just wanted to show you an image of the barn as it was built. It looks quite a bit different than it does today. This is a Dutch barn. It is a one-aisled Dutch barn. You would have another aisle like this on this side, but as the ground was, very important to have pasture here, they didn't install that. So here you can see the barn in the background, and this is where the lady of the house had a building built probably by her father-in-law to house 2 looms. 2 looms from the front room got moved into this little building. That's why he had a regular business here. I had the barn dendrobated, I want to say 6 years ago. John Rayburn from SUNY New Paltz, he did the dendro with his students. They came up with a date of 1816 of the barn. They didn't have great samples on the wane of the wood. You're supposed to drill in perpendicular to the wane which is the outside edge of the timber. And what you're looking for is climate. They're looking for climate. What they do is they take the core, glue it into a block of wood, and then they plane out a section, and they, with a microscope, they note the climate by the change of the wood per species, and they came up with 1816. But there was new discovery here this year. Well, in November, I removed one of the mounds was so full of hay, you had to get out of the building. So I removed the hay out of the building to find these inscriptions on the anchor beam. And it's Garrett Elmendorf and Junior Petrus Elmendorf. And the date of 1818. So they weren't far off. Maybe they had missed a couple of the outside layers. So that was a new discovery. So hopefully we got more discoveries coming. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of information that I have that I've been researching for long before I come here about this building. I do know the freeholders of Hurley, who sold this property to a Peter C. Ostrander in 1709. Was set aside by the freeholders as a minister. The church was not allowed to be built here in Hurley at that time, so the freeholders had set out to Ostrander. In 1715, Peter Ostrander sells to his son Errant. The property was known as the minister's lot, and it was known as lot in the deed. So it's 1715 is approximate date of when the house was built. It could be a little later than that. So doing research, most of my documentation or documents from this building were removed to New York Historical Society by Dr. Nash. Once Dr. Nash died, his heir donated all the documentation that he got from John L. Elmendorf, who lived in this property, and all that stuff went to the city. So I was able to look and record what's there, but did not find this next document that I found. So there's a gap. I have a gap of 40 years from Errant Ostrander to Levi Pauling. Now, this is a reference to this document. I don't know where this document is. At that time, not all documents were had to be recorded, and I believe it was 1850. Everything had to be recorded to the county. So it probably was filed. The two earlier deeds are filed with the county, and it wasn't long after that the date of this transfer of ownership did the war break out. So we had the French and Indian War break out then. So it's likely that's why it wasn't filed. Charles DeWitt owns property. Levi Pauling gives it to Charles DeWitt. Charles DeWitt then sells it to John D. Winecoop. I believe Charles was the first one to have an inn here. So and the ownership ends up changing hands quite frequently from him. John D. Winecoop passes away, and his heirs sell it to a Cornelius Du Bois in 1784. Cornelius Du Bois then sent it to Gillespie, not that long after to James Gillespie. And then in 2 years later, Gillespie sells it to Israel Niffen. Now, Israel Niffen, I just found out that um, he was a craftsperson. There's a desk in the Senate House that was made by Israel Niffen. So he was a craftsperson. Matthew Tenike then gets it from Israel Niffen in 1803. That deed is possible mortgage. Then because Israel Niffen sells it to Peter Elmendorf in 1804. Peter runs that tavern, and in I forget the date, 23, Petrus Elmendorf sells it to or gives it to his son by Peter Elmendorf, Peter P. Elmendorf. I do have a copy of that bill. Jane Elmendorf, who was Peter P. Elmendorf's wife, and I won't get into the genealogy of that, but Jane Elmendorf, Peter has passed away, and Jane Elmendorf is the sole owner of this property, and so she brings her nephew John L. Elmendorf to run the farm. So John L. and his wife Eliza are here on the farm as Jane's on in years. John L. Elmendorf deeds it to his son Peter Elmendorf, and then he was the postmaster. So, and then from there on, I haven't filled in the blanks. So that gives you a little bit of rundown of ownership. I'm still looking from 1715 to 1755. I do know the Rosa family is supposedly part of this property. What is now the Van Dusen property was in the hands of a Rosa before the building, and I suspect that they were owning this house at that time. So I haven't found that deed yet. So more to come. So, and history continues. This is a likeness of the office, and its its title is broadcasting, and this is in front of the store here, and this was in the Life magazine in 1924. So there you go. That's all I've got for you so far, and hopefully we'll gather more. Thank you for having me here tonight. I just want to say to all you historians out there that you can reach out to me at historian@townofhurley.org, or my email is jdeck8@verizon.net. You can reach out to me for any more information, or if you have extra questions that you come up with. And I just like to add, since I am the historian of town of Hurley, I would like you all to think about what your family records are and what you have in your files or in just a box somewhere. I am looking to and will scan anything that you folks have and want to share with the history of the town of Hurley. So I'm in the office at Friday mornings, and you could reach out to me at my email address, and please bring your photos, bring your documents. We need to help write history here. So thank you for having me this evening, and
Thanks very much.
I hope I was of some good information for you folks to learn about the house.
Thanks, Jim, very much. That was a wonderful presentation, super informative. Would you be so kind as to put into chat your email address so people can follow up if they have any further questions and like to reach out and touch with you?
We find that space. Where am I? Where's the meeting?
And at this time, we open it up to questions for Jim.
Where's
And
my? I lost.
you find the chat?
I lost it.
All right, well, let's open up for questions. I'll certainly start. Jim, how did you get into the restoration business, and how did the Elmendorf house come into your crosshairs and become of interest to you?
Okay, I started working for a store in Florida, New York, while going to school. I liked the field what I was doing, and um, so I went out on my own to do restoration. And over time, I was studying it on my free time. Basically, became a hobby, looking at these early buildings. I later went to work for New York State Parks and did restoration on historic sites. Washington's headquarters, did a lot of work on that. Senate House, Knox's headquarters, uh, among others. Hill Hold Museum, a Brick House Museum. I also formed what is known as Hudson Valley Vernacular Architecture with a friend, Peter Sinclair. Formated that group. Peter's strength was the barns and mine was the houses. Um, doing restoration, you learn by doing, as they say, and you learn to understand different elements of the houses. You learn change. Um, so that's where my strengths are. I've been consultant, my own little consult uh, business, and now I'm retired, thankfully, so I can finally work on my house. So some years ago, a friend of mine lived next door to me in the Crispell Cottage, and just failing in health, I would come up and help him out on Fridays, and I became friends with the Lords, Ruth and Sly Lord, and so Sly kept saying to me, "Save your pennies, save your pennies, save your pennies," and because I knew what the house was, I knew that it had a rare jamless surviving smoke hood in the building, and we don't have very many here in the county left. I think one or two down in Huguenot Street that are original, and here, and so that's why I really wanted this building. So Ruth died one day that she was going to relinquish it to me, and so they waited for me to sell my other house. I restored a one-room schoolhouse down in Shungham, and lived there while going, obviously working. And so I sold that house to buy this one, and they waited for me. So I was very happy, and I got a new family to join my family. So very pleased to come here.
Well, thank you. That's great. Appreciate you sharing that. Are there any, at this time, you can unmute yourselves and you can ask questions.
Yeah,
Or you can shoot emails in the chat.
let's see, where's the chat? Team chat? No.
The chat feature is right beside the share button.
I don't see it.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, if they jump in and ask, it'd be easier for me.
What was that?
There's some 20 new messages. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no questions,
There is questions here. There's like 20 of them.
I'm sorry?
It's like 20 questions.
Oh,
Yeah.
you have a bunch of questions? Go ahead.
Yeah. Ken King writes, and I'm gonna just tell you instead of typing. Sarah will be attending the Ostrander reunion. I will be at the Ostrander reunion, obviously, because the Ostranders are coming here. Sarah, thank you for attending. Hope to see you this spring. Thanks, Linda. Hello there, cousin Peter is my 8th great grandfather. Which Peter? That's Elmendorf or Peter Ostrander. So, um, William Elmendorf, you're welcome. There's my email address at the house, and I will give you another one. I'll give you the historian. And that's, oh, that's, I don't know if it went to you, Raul. Sandy, thank you for attending. Thanks for mind you. Hello, Beth.
If there are no other questions, again, thank you, Jim. Your attention to the detail was fantastic. The story of the Elmendorf house is fascinating. I had no idea that it was reconstructed so substantially. So I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and turning out this evening. Stay tuned for upcoming lectures as we move into the next month of March, and information will be posted on our website and social media. And be sure to sign up to receive our newsletters by visiting our website at hurleyheritage.society.org. With that, I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you very much again, Jim, for your time and a wonderful presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if there's any other questions, you can email me at historian@townofhurley.org.
Great. Great.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And remember, this was recorded and it will be posted on our website and Facebook in the coming days. Okay?
UK. Wow.
UK and Arkansas and all over. Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.